This is the Surly Grognards for February 23rd, 2015. This is Peter Bowman, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Eric Carlson. How are you doing tonight, Eric?
I'm doing all right.
Excellent. It snowed a little bit this weekend, but not nearly as much as we've been getting.
Yeah, there wasn't a blizzard, which left me confused and frightened that I don't handle change well. Clearly, it's the end of the world again.
In an entirely different way. Oh, God. So, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about game mechanics and getting stuck on ones that might not be appropriate for certain situations. This was brought to us from a question we received via email from James, who writes, Good evening, Peter and Eric. I have a quandary for my play group I could really use some help with. Namely that my D&D group seems to have stuck itself into a corner. Basically, the group is stuck running one campaign with sequels because key players don't want to do anything else. Specifically, I'd like to wean my play group off of exploding dice. Practically every campaign I have played with the group has used Savage Worlds. I like the system, but the group as a whole has found exploding dice addictive. Really, really addictive. This came to its peak when we ran a Neon Genesis Evangelion conversion, where the pilots were in Savage Worlds and the mechs were in a homebrew called Dice Wars. Basically D20 with D20 scratched out and replaced with 2D10. The results were amusing, but disastrous for the campaign. D20 was not optimized for exploding dice, and is made much worse when you're rolling 2d10. We wound up obliterating angels almost casually because the players put together have more dice to explode than the boss. I could really use some advice. Have you ever been a player which got addicted to a mechanic in a bad way? Alright. So, that's a straightforward question, but it sparked the idea of sort of talking about more than just that specific mechanic, and about mechanics as a whole, and how players often become attached to certain mechanics, and game masters especially, and they start leaking into games where they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah. I absolutely adore the idea of adding or removing dice. I also recognize that this probably should not be in everything.
Right.
Like that's a mechanic that I want to see everywhere, including where it probably shouldn't be. And I actively have to restrain myself from it suggesting we add it to things.
Right. I think it's a great mechanic. I think that it's one of those mechanics that there's several sort of basic dice rolling mechanics that exist. There's the classic, sort of straight, like 3-die-6 bell curve type thing.
Right. Or just a single die shooting for a target number.
Yeah, single die shooting for a target number, and then dice where dice get added and subtracted. Sometimes shooting for number of dice, and like the dice shooting for a number of them. Like there's a target number, you're trying to roll an individual d6s in a pool of dice, and you count the number of times you succeed in doing that. Or ones where you add the dice together, you can add or subtract dice, which modifies the difficulty of the roll. Those are all valid and perfectly fine sort of basic mechanics. They don't all give you the same sort of general feel, though, is the thing.
It's true. Like, exploding dice is great for when you're doing those big... when you're looking for those big fuck-yeah cinematic moments.
Right. They're great for, bigger-than-life cinematic badass heroes.
Yes.
And villains. They're not so great for grim, dark, and gritty sort of, scraping by on the edge of like life and death constantly type things.
Yeah.
Or if you're trying to get at sort of an effect of slowly grinding your opponents grinding each other down over a course of a lengthy fight as you sort of basically hammer each other into oblivion.
Yeah, as you wheel on each other until someone falls over.
Right. So I totally get the problem with using sort of exploding dice for something like Evangelion.
Yeah,
because most of the fights that didn't really end weren't like nothing, one huge decisive strike, boom, dead.
Yeah, and it's I find it's inappropriate for most mech games in general.
Yeah, I could see that. It would make sense in a sort of a mech game where you have players have the player characters mecha are all powerful mecha, and you end up fighting like large numbers of enemies.
Yeah, so like say your average Gundam where you're fighting
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
swarms of Zaku.
Right, and
That makes
then a
sense.
few named enemies in like they're actually good mecha. So
Or one of the crappy mecha is just that he's that awesome looking
Right.
at you, Char.
right, and that is and for that I would Exploding Dice works perfectly, which is why you could do that sort of game using the feng shui rules. I'd say.
Yes.
In fact, I think feng shui would be really good for that.
Oh, yeah, actually.
Just because of it's
Pretty well for Voltron also,
yeah.
thinking about it. But yeah, neither here nor there.
Right. But yeah, there are a lot of mechanics out there that people do get attached to. Like I know people who like absolutely adore conceptually like level-based class and level-based systems.
Right.
They really really like that. That doesn't apply to every genre though. Is the thing.
Yeah, I find class and level based stuff I find works really well in like high fantasy or super space opera.
Yeah,
But as soon as you start doing like spy or criminal stuff or even more, I hesitate to use the word like hard sci-fi, but more Star Trek, less Star Wars sci-fi.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You definitely want to branch away from the whole like class and leveling system.
Well, the big thing for that is that in any genre where the characters are expected to be somewhat well-rounded.
Yes.
Like a lot of science fiction, like while everyone will probably have their specialties, they'll also know a lot of other stuff too.
Yeah.
That's especially true if you're doing like a spy game. Like if you're doing like a spy game, a James Bond straight James Bond is hard to do for a spy game because Bond it's about Bond. It's like,
Right.
Which is why the Bond role playing game you start out lower rank and you operate in teams, and for that it really ends up feeling more like Mission Impossible, where everyone is a specialist, but you still
Everyone can do a little bit of everything.
Anyone can do something, but everyone has their specialty, their bailiwick where they're strongest.
Yeah, absolutely. And or like even looking at like Star Trek, like yeah, Kirk understands science and medicine, but he's really best at punching things and seducing women.
Right, and being leadership.
Yeah, and leadership.
Yeah, whereas Spock
And
Spock,
Bones can't seduce shit, but he can definitely like fix your toenail, which has been taken over by an energy being and is now testing the entire crew to see if they're worthy.
right, and Spock is the super scientist.
Right. Who figures out it is in fact an energy being.
Right, exactly. And so that's why none of that wouldn't work as well as in a class-based system. It really cries out for something which is more freeform.
Yes.
But and I'd say that's true for a lot of sci-fi. Actually, that's sort of that way. It's really only when you get up to like sort of Star Wars levels, and even then, I would personally.
Yeah, and Star Wars really fits more into a fantasy. The tropes are much more fantasy with sci-fi trappings.
They are. Although I still think that you almost are. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I part of
Dude,
me also,
it's got a wizard.
Oh no, that's not my point. It's that even there, the characters are still fairly well rounded for the most part.
I don't know about that. Like, maybe Luke, but only because he's the protagonist.
Han's pretty well rounded.
Han's all about scumbaggery and jet flying. Or starship piloting.
And mechanics, and...
No, he's got Chewie for that. Every time you see someone doing mechanics, it's Han getting under Chewie's foot, or fucking it up.
Maybe, but my point is that Han, the thing is, storyline-wise, he actually knows enough to do stuff.
Okay.
It's just that they don't show it on screen. Like, it's implied that he's done
I'm
a lot
just remembering when they don't have Chewie in the asteroid belt in Empire Strikes Back, and he keeps on fucking up. It's R2 that actually ends up fixing everything.
Chewie's there in the asteroid belt.
Is he there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, because they're never apart.
Chewie screws up, too.
Well, have you ever tried to weld anything with fur hanging off your arms like
I
that?
I know. Just saying. But yeah, so I'm just trying to think of other sort of class. I mean, so that's the class and level thing versus point-based freeform building it really is genre dependent. It
Yeah.
is largely the point I'm trying to get to.
And I love point-based.
I agree.
I prefer that to level based systems.
As a general rule of thumb, I do too.
As a rule of thumb.
And I'm honestly, I mean, a lot of high fantasy works well without class and level. Also, if you really don't want, if you want to, I mean, the nice thing about point-based systems is that if you want to be a specialist, you can.
Yes.
But that said, I acknowledge that there are games where the class system works well, and you don't need to interject the point-based stuff into it. So, but at any rate, but yeah, like the
'cause sometimes you just want to be a fighter. You don't want to deal with all the other shit.
right. But yeah, like the exploding dice thing. I mean, that sort of thing really sort of is what is that particular mechanic really is designed for very cinematic, big sort of big hero moments and and so forth, and not so much the sort of the classic, like again, like as James said in his email, D20 is not really well designed to handle that because D&D's never had it.
Right. It just doesn't. It doesn't blend well. Is the issue? Even when the bad guys have exploding dice, also there's just when the entire encounter is built around taking out one big scary the team against one big scary monster, and yeah, the monster is never going to have as many dice that he can throw as the good guys.
Right.
Or the party, I should say.
Right. And
who
now,
knows
mind you, it depends on how it depends on how explodey the dice are too. I mean,
yeah,
it's always a given. But so thinking on that, it's like, say I wouldn't have done that myself. I mean, I have actually one time in way back in a long while ago when I was still playing second edition AD&D. I was running a campaign. I decided I wanted to experiment with a new critical sort of hit set of rules that
I remember when critical hits were fucking everywhere, and everyone was trying to bring them into like D&D.
Well, it always had them to a certain degree, but
no, I mean like with the charts and everything.
Oh God, well yeah, I wasn't using that, and I'll get to that in a second. But the specific thing I was experimenting with was, well, okay, there's one system. I'd seen it suggested somewhere, and I forget where, and that's not really important. But the way it worked is that if you rolled a 20, a natural 20, you rolled again, and if the second roll hit, you basically got to roll damage twice. But if you rolled 20 of that, you could do it again. It exploded.
Ah.
And that ended up not working too well. As in one of the very early encounters, the party, the dwarven rogue in the party, who was armed with a heavy crossbow, opened up. I had sort of this encounter set up where there's an evil wizard who's like level 7. The party was like level 3. So I started out at level 3 in that particular campaign. And he was sort of a major sort of plot character that was going to be recurring and such. And he was sort of sitting there. There was some sort of ritual going on. He was supposed to like teleport away at some point, right? Like disappear. But the rogue won initiative because he's a rogue.
Right. Look at me, I'm the only guy with a decent dex.
Right, exactly. And he rolled to hit the wizard and crit and crit and crit and killed the wizard in one shot before the wizard could do anything.
Well, I guess now he's a lich.
And and I was like, I could have fudged it, but I said, you know what? No, that's lame. I'll think of something else later on in the camp. I'll think of some way to replace him. But that led to the joke about about that character having killed the adventurer, because he kind of did. They were wondering how many experience points killing the adventurer would be worth. So yeah, that's one of the things that mechanic I like it. I liked it conceptually, but it was born out to be a bad idea, and it didn't really fit into D&D.
And you know what? That kind of shit, only comes up in playtesting.
Exactly.
Or it should come up in playtesting so you can mitigate it.
Right. So yeah, but to your whole thing with the critical hit tables, that's so the whole sort of critical hit and critical fumble tables thing was popularized by Rollmaster largely.
Right. And
this,
everyone tried to introduce them into every game system.
yeah,
I remember that.
I do too, and I also remember that thinking that they were a terrible idea in Rollmaster.
I found them entertaining in Rollmaster because I was like 13. And I was like, yeah, cool, I tripped over a dead imaginary tortoise.
Exactly. That's what everyone remembers. You trip over an imaginary dead turtle, an invisible imaginary dead turtle, and lose your
That's
turn.
right, yeah.
It's like, okay. What? And, the results in the fumble tables were hysterical.
Yeah.
But they really,
Even just introducing the idea that the fumble in general in Dungeons & Dragons, like, you got a 5% chance to stab yourself through the neck every time you swing your sword.
right. And it's one of the things.
That bore out to be bad.
Oh, absolutely. I agree completely. It's one of the things, the critical fumble is one of those things that sounds good in practice. Like, it's like, oh yeah, like there's a chance that, something bad will happen. If there's a chance, like, even if, like, in systems where it's like, well, if you have like in D&D, you've got a 5% chance of succeeding on a 20 and getting extra damage, then there should be a 5% on the ones, and something bad should happen. Not thinking that, just having you automatically miss on a one is actually bad.
Yeah. Bad enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, and it's one of those things. It's like it doesn't. I rapidly came to the conclusion I hate fumbles, which are anything but you just miss.
The auto miss, and I find them entertaining, but I find they tend to bog things down and cause bad blood with people that have trouble seeing the comedy in their own errors immediately.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like oftentimes they'll think that it's pretty funny like a week or two later, but at the time they'll get upset, and it ruins the fun for everybody.
Yeah. And also, I don't think it's.
And I've been guilty of that too.
Sure. I don't think it's. I personally don't think it's a good mechanic just at all. I think it doesn't. It doesn't really bring anything to the table, other than punishing the players for something something that's already that's bad.
Mm.
It's like this is a bad thing. Let's make it even worse.
Let's compound that. Yeah.
Right. Why? It's like, it makes it more realistic. Well, maybe, but...
It is not realistic to have a 5% chance to stab yourself on the neck every time you swing your sword.
I agree. And admittedly, fumbles were less... I don't know, I forget what the percent chance of fumbling in Rollmaster was, because I don't really care.
Yeah, you had to be profoundly terrible roll to get a fumble in Rollmaster, if I remember correctly.
It wasn't as bad. It depended. There was a sliding scale of how bad the fumbles got, also.
Yeah,
and like the really bad fumbles were catastrophic for you. I mean, like to the point of like killing yourself instantly, or killing like a friend or like an ally instantly.
Yeah,
I remember someone actually running the numbers like a unit of pikemen whenever they attacked. Basically, odds were that one of them would kill someone else in the unit. every round the unit attacked, and it's just like, that's actually not good design.
Yeah,
that's bad.
Or that you can be murdered by a fucking cat.
Yeah, that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
House cat, most terrifying thing in Rollmaster. Seriously, those tiny criticals I remember were just like fucking murderous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but like there are the number of people who like we're talking about like addicted to mechanics. The fumble table is one that hung around forever. Like,
and people are trying to use it in everything.
I know people who I know people were homebrewing fumble tables for 4th Ed D&D.
I remember like someone tried to introduce a fumble table to fucking Shadowrun. I was like, what? No, Shadowrun's already got enough shit going on. You don't need a fumble or critical table on that.
No, dear God, no.
It's kind of already baked into how the dice system works. You don't need a table for it.
Nope. Yeah, it's just like, no, stop. Stop creating fumble tables and everything. Stop. But as I said, like the number of people who are like, oh, but I've they played a lot of games that had fumble tables. So they're like, okay, well these should always be in a game because they've always been the games I played in, not thinking about the implications of them in other games.
Right.
Like there are games where a fumble table can work out well and be kind of fun, I guess. Games where like it's like comedic failure is sort of expected. Like I could see a fumble table being
Paranoia. I could totally see one.
Paranoia, Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I just would like Ghostbusters. I would not make sure it wasn't like it doesn't have one. It's got enough comedic failure as it is. But if you had one, it wouldn't like the fumble results wouldn't be like lethal. Whereas in Paranoia, they probably would be.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's because you've got 6 lives anyway.
Exactly. So, but and again, but those games don't actually need them, so they don't have them.
Right. I think it's easy enough to get yourself killed in Paranoia.
Right. You don't need to add extra ways to screw yourself over. So yeah, it's one of those things like I think part of the reason people get keep using certain mechanics is because that's what they've always used, and they can't envision
habit. It's always been there.
It's not just habit. It's like they just they can't envision not having that mechanic.
Mm.
And it's one of the reasons that whenever I'm playing a new system, I try to play it as by the book as I can. The first time.
No, absolutely. Every time I try a new system, it's like rules as written, the end. Until I played it long enough to get a feel for the system, and like maybe there's some rules as intended in here, or even this rule just doesn't work. We shall change it this way,
right?
Or at least temporarily until we determine whether or not that's any better.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and there are a bunch of things. Like for instance, a great example of that for me was the first time the first game of 4th Ed D&D I ran by the book completely, like
right
out the wazoo. And like the second one, I sort of house ruled a few things. And by the third one, I had basically said, okay, things I'm going to do differently. First off, I'm not going to worry about how much experience the players earn per encounter. I'll just tell them they level up when I think it makes sense storyline wise.
Right.
That was the big one. Because I found tracking experience points is actually just kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it can be a little tiresome.
I mean, I understand that people there's a lot of like knowing how much experience you've earned is one of those things that like always is fun. I mean, it's
yes,
it's one of those, but it ends up being
a distraction.
A distraction. It's
now tracking the amount of experience you have is important in the said point-based games.
Right, exactly.
Or even in Iron Kingdoms because because of the way the experience table works. Like, if you're doing it right, the first few sessions, everyone should be getting effectively a skill up each session,
right?
And until things start petering out,
right?
And it's important to keep track of that because it's just the way the system's built. That's how the math works.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, I found actually the other Iron Kingdoms game I've been running, the one with my Thursday night crew. We're actually getting to the point where I'm thinking we might actually start up a new game, and I might end up basically handing out experience at about half rate because our sessions usually are about 2 hours,
right?
Maybe shorter than normal. So they've actually been accelerating through the experience too fast. Is the actual thing I found, and I ended up basically at one point started handing out experience like every other session, and that actually got things back under control. It slowed things down enough that it made certain sense, but they'd already gotten powerful enough that it was hard for me to actually
start reining things in. Right.
Well, the important thing was I was like, okay, for the stories I'm trying to run right now, they're too powerful. God damn it.
I started running into that too.
Yeah.
More the problem was trying to find encounters that would be a challenge for some players but wouldn't outright murder others.
Yep.
Which is why when I run Iron Kingdoms again, there will be no fleet room. I found that broke Chris's character, honestly.
Yeah. I actually think that both of us ended up handing out money a bit too liberally, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree there. Part of it was, I think, part of Iron Kingdoms is having, like, arcane mechanical wackiness at your disposal. But yeah, at the same time, yeah, the fleet rune's too fucking good.
Yeah, I don't know. At any rate,
Plus one defense and speed, yeah. Just no. No.
at any rate, so I mean, thinking about other. I'm trying to think of other mechanics that that end up getting held onto too long. But yeah, so as I was saying, back to the experience thing. The other thing that it tends to do, like especially in D&D, is the players it sort of makes everyone sort of focus more on how much experience have I earned, how close am I to leveling,
Right.
and you end up losing a little bit of focus on what's actually going on.
Yeah, they players start getting obsessed over that.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit too mechanical, and I'm a gamist player by nature. I love like mechanics. I love number crunching and all that stuff. But I'm also but that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing important to me.
Yeah. Second edition Dungeons and Dragons, where you'd get experience for the magic items you had. Remember people fighting over magic items they couldn't even use because they wanted the experience.
Right.
And I just, for the longest time, I thought that was just the way it was supposed to be. And then I played other systems and like, wow, this is such a breath of fresh air. You just give the magic item to the person that can use it best, regardless, because you don't get experience anyway. The item is itself the fucking reward.
Right. Honestly, the way you handle that, and the way you should handle that in second ed, is that you just basically the experience you get for finding gold and equip and magic items and such is just average out across the party.
Yeah, that's definitely, and encounters in general, like all of that shit should just be averaged out across the party.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's not the way
It's not the way it's written.
Yeah, that's not the way it's written, and yeah, kind of bullshit. I have a lot of problems with second edition.
I agree that you do not get any arguments from me, Eric. You know that. Neither of us like second edition AD&D. I like it more than you do. I don't hate it. I merely dislike it.
I actively hate it.
I know you do.
I can forgive first ed D&D for its foibles because it's the first fucking thing. But yeah, second ed just... there are enough other systems out there doing things differently and better that I can't forgive it.
Yeah.
And it was the first system I ever played. Second Dungeons and Dragons.
That was not the first one. That's not the first one I played. The first one I played was basic D&D.
Right.
And,
where your class was elf?
No. What was my character? I think I was a cleric when I played.
Mm.
And then I moved on to DMing. Because I was one of the few people who actually was willing to. And look where that's led me to this day.
You have a valuable skill set that you cannot make money at.
Yep. Oh, God. So, yeah, yeah, but can you think of any other sort of examples of mechanics that you've seen people get really attached to and just can't move on from? I'm curious.
Not necessarily mechanics, but dice types.
Really?
I've seen people, like, really obsess over there being different types of dice in their game system. Like why this should be this die roll should be in die 8s. Why isn't it in die 8s? Because the whole system is built around d6s. Why isn't the system built around d10s instead of d6s? Because it's not World of Darkness.
Yeah, although I will admit, if you're not doing bell curves, I kind of understand where they're coming from on that.
I kind of do too, but at the same time, this comes in the whole arbitrarily changing rules to fit what they like without blah blah blah. Without fully comprehending the consequences. Like, because it throws the math alpha out of whack for fucking everything.
Oh, absolutely.
When you change the dice size on anything.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it took me a while to figure that out myself. Well, it took me one session of playing it with different sized dice to figure that out. But oh yeah, math is a thing that exists.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I look at games like Shadowrun and all that stuff, and my gut reaction looking at that is, or anything which is, you roll a number of dice, you're counting successes, and I look at that, I'm like, I get that, the reason they went for D6 is because they're readily available in common, and everybody has them.
Right.
The problem is that if you're going to do that, it's such a tight. The D6 is such a tight variance, and it's such a there's so little gradation. It's one of the things I keep thinking this. It would have opened up a lot of design space if they designed the game around D10s as opposed to D6s. Now, I understand they did.
What Shadowrun did was to get around this was the aforementioned exploding dice.
Yeah, that introduces some other things.
Yeah,
such as a few problems they had in their like when some of the earlier versions of the rules, like there's no actual mechanical difference between a difficulty 7 and a difficulty 7 check, 8 check. I mean,
yeah,
because to get a 7, you have to roll a.
You have to roll a 6. And then you automatically...
Oh, no, sorry, no, difficulty
between
difficulty
6
and 7, that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
There's literally no difference there.
So you have to roll a 6 and then a 1. So, yeah, there's no difference.
Yeah, it's like,
Clearly a design flaw.
Yes!
Clearly the work of FASA.
Yep!
Amazing world builders. Like, seriously, like, still some of my favorite games worlds came out of FASA's golden days. They could not write rules for the fucking life of them.
Not for role-playing games, at least.
Okay, fine. I still think BattleTech's a little too complicated for an actual board game. Too much actual bookkeeping involved. But
I know. That's not a mechanical problem. That's a style and taste problem.
Yes. No, I totally agree with that. It's just... the game flows too slowly, and there's too much bookkeeping, I feel, for a good war game. I think it's great for a mecha combat game for an RPG, though.
I know. I disagree with you. I think it's actually perfectly fine for small-scale battles. As long as... And,
and now we will fight to the death.
Yeah. No, but for a 4-on-4 mech combat,
yeah.
you kind of want that level of detail.
Okay, yeah, fine, fair enough there. But at that point, I'm like, so we could be playing Mech Warrior instead of BattleTech for 4-on-4.
But what if I don't? But what if I don't want to roleplay? What if I just want to have mechs fighting mechs?
Well, then that's what we have 40K for.
No, what mecha are there in 40K, Eric?
Dreadnoughts.
Those aren't mecha. I'm sorry, they're not.
They're not. You're right. Heavy gear.
That's actually a valid argument. And heavy gear came out much later than BattleTech did.
This is true. Heavy gear clearly learned from
more than 10 years.
Yeah, heavy gear clearly learned from BattleTech's design foibles.
Yep. And I still prefer BattleTech.
I really, really like the mech designs in Heavy Gear. I have not played enough of it to have an informed opinion about its mechanics.
It's fine. It's just not my cup of tea.
Fair enough.
And honestly, this sort of ties into the point which we're talking about. Actually, is the reason BattleTech is the way it is because it is not just a war game; it is a simulationist war game.
Yes. Yes.
And taking that kind of mechanics and applying it to a game which is not supposed to be simulationist wouldn't work.
Yeah, trying to do that in 40K would be like just the height of ridiculousness.
Right. It's like the difference between if you're doing like
you have a game with guys with chainsaw swords, and this is a valid weapon that works. You're trying to do it simulationist. Really?
Oh god, chainsaw swords.
Really cool. Incredibly stupid and impractical, but really cool.
But honestly, it's like looking at the difference between Starfleet battles and Battlefleet Gothic. One of these is a simulationist game. The other is Battlefleet Gothic.
A perfectly valid game as long as it's just doing the Imperium versus Chaos.
With still a few foibles in its design, which are entirely GWisms.
Yes, absolutely.
Like the fact that on the critical hit table, you're more likely to lose your port weapons than your starboard weapons.
Oh, right. I'd forgotten about that one. It's entirely true.
I remember discovering when you guys were playing, and I was looking at the critical hit table. I told you guys, everyone looked at me like, "Wait, what?" I said, "No, look at the table." They're like, "Why is that?" And I spent like the next like half an hour looking at it, like, "Oh, it's because of the boarding rules, the hit and run boarding rules."
Yep.
Because they didn't want to come up with another chart for it, so they just said, "Okay, you roll 1 die 6 on the critical hit chart, and nothing happens on a 1." That's so GW.
It's so very GW.
Well, this should have been 2 different tables.
That requires playtesting and work and stuff.
Oh, Battlefleet Gothic. That's a game I desperately wanted to like more than I do. I really want to like.
Game I desperately wanted to like have valid options besides
Imperium and
Chaos
Chaos.
and Imperium.
Yeah.
I wanted the orcs to be good, and I wanted the Eldar to not be broken as all fuck off.
Yeah. It's god. It's just you look at it's got so many problems. It's a goofy fun game. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, it's a goofy fun game, and it'd be a great beer and pretzels game if it didn't cost $100 15 years ago.
Right.
I can't even imagine how much it would cost now.
Oh god, the pain, the agony. Oh god, no. Oh my god, that game is so almost good. Well, no, it's not almost good. It's so almost tolerable.
Beautiful models, great flavor, really cool stuff. Not good on the rules system, which is pretty GW on the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, Battlefleet Gothic is a great microcosm of GW in general.
It really is. It's the really amazing thing about it is at its core basically Man-O-War.
Yeah.
Except not as well designed, somehow. And Man-O-War has problems.
Oh, man.
But it's better balanced.
Yeah. Yeah, the Eldar were like the friggin' high elves on steroids.
Well, they work like the one high elf ship that can do that.
Yeah.
What if the entire fleet can do
fucking
that?
Fleet.
Wait, what? Only one high elf ship can move.
Oh, that was Jervis Johnson. I guarantee that was all Jervis.
Almost certainly. Oh my god, that game. I was like, this game's cool. The really awful thing is that when it comes to war games, unsurprisingly, I have a fairly heavy simulationist bent. And
Right.
that's largely the fact that the first 2 war games I played were Battletech and Starfleet Battles.
Yeah, and those are totally simulationist.
Oh god, yes.
I'm different. I am all about the rule of cool and goofiness.
Right.
But as long as things are balanced and you can mitigate bad dice rolls.
Right.
Which is why I'm such a huge fan of Warmer Hordes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Warmer Hordes is great. I love Warmer. I really like the War Machine rules. I think honestly, thinking on it, I think that I like from a design standpoint the Hordes Warlocks more like the way the Warcasters work.
Yeah. No, I will agree with you there because it encourages more big stompy monsters.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like the War Machine aesthetic.
That's sort of my problem is like
Yeah,
I love the aesthetic of War Machine.
Kind of how I fell into the Pharaoh because it's steam-powered cybernetic pig monsters.
Oh god.
I mean, never mind the fact that Pharaoh have a quarter of the options any other faction has, and are widely considered to be the weakest faction because they just don't have enough options.
Right.
But steam-powered cybernetic pig monsters.
Oh yeah. So, but yeah, like that whole thing, like I've seen people sort of like trying to apply some like simulationist tendencies, like simulationist ideas into games like Battlefleet Gothic, which is not going to work because it's designed to be a fast-paced fleet battle game.
Right.
And you can't get down to that level of detail you have in the Starfleet battles when you're dealing with like 15, 20 ships.
Yeah.
The game will take years.
Well, even in some of the second edition 40K had a lot of simulations tendencies.
Oh, it did, absolutely.
And it was like, as our mutual friend Ben Peel once put it, it's a game covered in trash because of all the fucking counters.
Yeah. Oh my god. And first at the original first at 40K, like Rogue Trader stuff.
Yeah, never played it.
I've read the rules. No.
I've read the rules too, and my thought was, how do you actually play this game?
And there are people who swear up and down it's the best version of 40K, and I think they're insane. But that's just me. I mean, I adored Starfleet Battles. I did. But even I sort of look at that and I'm like, it's almost too simulationist.
It's too much for me. It really is.
I completely understand the people who absolutely adored the game and like played it obsessively, because it really is unlike almost any other game out there. Because
and I totally get that. I understand that this is what you want to, how you want your games to be, and I get that. That's cool, but. Dude, I just want my Klingons to blow shit up. I don't want to have to track, like, how many living crew members I have on each fucking D7.
Oh, you don't have to do that, fortunately, but...
I was exaggerating.
I know you honestly, were. But, like, in a one-on-one ship duel, it's the best starship dueling starship comp game I've ever seen. And you know, and they did a brilliant job for their tournament scene of balancing the tournament cruisers against each other.
Mm.
They are so well. They did. Emerald Design, the Emerald Design Bureau, the company that makes Starfleet Battles.
Is it still around?
I don't know. They went in cycles of basically existing and not existing. Like,
yeah, because
I think they're in an existing cycle right now.
Okay, because it's been a long time since I've seen Starfleet Battles in the store, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Exactly.
Because it, like you said, it has this weird tendency to go.
Yep, ADB's website is up. So.
Okay.
But one of my favorite things. This is sort of apropos of nothing, but they also published a strategic war game called I forget what it was called, Federation and Empire, which is basically just it's a strategic war game which is simulate an event in the version of the Star Trek universe that Starfleet Battles is set in, which is called the General War, which is this big it's basically kind of like World War I in the Star Trek universe.
Gotcha.
So it's like, you know, the Klingons are, and like it's the war starts at much the same. The whole thing ends up going a lot like World War I did. The reason I call it that, it starts when one of the Klingons' allies invades one of the Federation's allies, or sorry, an ally of one of the Federation's allies, which pulls them in. Which pulls the Klan to attack them, which pulls the Federation to attack them, which pulls the Romulans to attack the Federation, which pulls the Gorn to attack the Romulans. At least it's a gigantic war. And so...
As things are wont to go.
Right. And so it's a strategic game where you're moving fleets around the map and like very simple mechanics. The rulebook has the audacity to say, and if you want, you can simulate all the battles that you have in Starfleet Battles. To which my friends and I have always joked, yes, which would make Federation Empire be the first real-time war game. Because it would take about as many years to play it out as the actual war supposedly took. Because, you know, as I mentioned, Starfleet Battles is a great one-on-one ship combat game, where one ship's fighting one ship, and each battle between those ships will probably, between experienced players who know the rules, will take about 2 hours. Which is fine. It's a good length for a game, just in general. Any game that lasts about 2 hours is a good length, just a general rule of thumb.
Yeah, just in general.
And for a one-on-one ship combat game, that might seem too slow if you're always think about things in like a fleet battle. But that's the problem, is that if you try to expand this one-on-one ship combat game out to an actual fleet, it slows down immensely. Like 3 ships on 3 ships, small squadron, still doable. It'll take you most of the day. Yeah. Actual fleets will probably take you at like a weekend.
Yeah. And like I said, too much for me.
I've
like I could totally see using it as the ship combat system for a role playing game.
Sure, I can see that.
And that's basically my take on simulationist war game. This is a great way to do this for a role playing game.
Whereas I actually really enjoy that for a war game. I like the intellectual challenge they present. Especially with
and I totally get that.
Specifically Starfleet Battles. Battletech, not so much the intellectual challenge part of it.
Right.
Largely because Starfleet Battles, there's like the actual, like, the way you take damage and all that stuff is, like, the actual level of detail you have actually affects the actual tactics of the game.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons that it's a brilliant game. Though it's still, after playing Babylon 5 Wars, which was a much faster paced game.
Yeah, and even that was a little much for me, but was still fun. I enjoyed.
I think that's sort of the as simulationist as Eric can handle.
Yeah. As simulationist, but while still it being a war game, not part of an RPG.
Right, exactly. But like,
because I grew up playing 40K and fantasy, where it's like each individual guy is basically there to get taken off the table to buy a temporary advantage.
Right, but like and especially for a Starship combat game, I like the sort of the aspect of like taking damage to like one side of the ship doesn't affect like the rest of the ship. Like it won't just automatically blow you up if you get hammered there.
Right.
But you lose effectiveness, so you have to like not have that facing the enemy because it's more vulnerable and you have less weapons there now or what have you. And so on and so forth. But again, that level of detail, I would not want to apply that to a large fleet game because, oh god, I want to get this game done like today, not over the course of this week.
Yeah, the whole multiple day thing, like I can't. I just can't, because I will lose. I'll lose my train of thought between sessions. Is what'll happen.
Right.
Because I'll be like, I'll have things planned out for at least the next turn, maybe 2 or 3, and then we take a break and we go and get lunch. We hang out, have a couple drinks, I come back. It's like, what was I doing? And it's just like for a 2-hour break, and like for multiple days, it's like, remember I was the Klingons.
Oh god. So yeah. But yeah, I'm just sort of so there's that. So I definitely think that's the style of the game. Mechanics, have to change depending on the style of game you're playing. Is what it boils down to.
What it all boils down to, and letting go of your favorite baby mechanics for a different style of game that you want to try out is kind of necessary.
Yeah.
As far as weeding your players off of something like, say, exploding dice, try something where their exploding dice isn't nearly so important. I would suggest like Third Ed Shadowrun, or because the exploding dice are useful for when you're trying to do something really hard, but they don't actually affect how effective you are doing normal shit.
Right.
It just means you have a chance to pull off the impossible. Is what it means.
Right. Yeah, I actually agree with you on that. I mean, like, exploding dice, I will say this, it's a fun mechanic.
It absolutely is.
But it doesn't apply to everything. And I agree with Eric that, basically try playing a system where the exploding dice aren't as explodey and aren't as effective.
Yeah.
Is probably a good first step. Also, sitting down and explaining to the rest of the group that, yeah, we're trying this because it's a genre we're all interested in, and exploding dice make no fucking sense here.
Or even, yes, you get your exploding dice when you're busy whining about your dad and suffering from abandonment issues. But as soon as you get in the Ava, we're doing it with this system, no exploding dice.
Honestly, for the Evangelion D20 thing, if the players insisted on having exploding dice, and you want them to, like, a group of players fight one big baddie angel, it's just, start giving the angel multiple attacks and stuff like that. Or like,
or just incapable of taking more than this amount of damage per turn.
Right, exactly. That's the big thing, honestly.
It's like, aha, I hit them, and we did a gajillion points of damage, and a gajillion points of damage, shoot, blah, 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 blah. And it's great, and it takes 5. What do you mean it only takes 5? I mean, its AT field is doing wacky Evangelion-y things, so it only takes 5 damage.
Oh.
Actually, your players might actually get really upset with that.
Well, no, as long as you warn them ahead of time that, like, different angels will have different effects, and some of them might actually, be able to handle, like, the exploding dice in weird ways.
Yeah.
As always, communication is important. Don't just spring that on them out of nowhere. That will just lead to hurt feelings.
Yeah. When you're fighting the angels, just be aware that they're angels. They do wacky shit all the time. This will be gameplay mechanic things. So, just warning you, things aren't necessarily going to work the way you think they should.
Right. And if they're okay with that, then, At any rate, we have a question we actually got on the forums, which I wanted to get to before we forget. It was posted as sort of a suggestion for a show, but it turns out that I have such a good short answer for it that I don't think we could really spin it out into a full show. Although we sort of could, but the other problem is... anyways, the question is, this comes from Sparky7491 on the forums, and they say, hello, I have a suggestion/challenge for you guys. It's about mechanics and campaign, if you have time left, for a tabletop RPG based off an anime/manga that would be difficult to make into a tabletop RPG. The anime/manga that first came to my mind is One Piece, but if you guys can think of any more difficult one to turn into a tabletop RPG, then go with that one. Also, maybe you could do this the same suggestion challenge next week, but with a video game. Alright, so, here's the problem with this question.
The answer is Hero.
The answer for One Piece is Hero System, specifically Champions.
Or any superhero system, because One Piece is a superhero show with pirates.
They're pirate superheroes.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Luffy mechanically is Mr. Fantastic. Or Plastic Man.
He's totally Plastic Man. He's not smart enough to be...
I know, I was talking about its combat mechanics, and I will say this, Luffy is on par with Mr. Fantastic in terms of creativity and using his abilities in a fight.
All right,
fact,
yeah,
he might actually exceed him. Luffy gets really fucking creative.
I have only seen the first few episodes. Yes, the actual episodes, not the 4Kids abomination.
Right.
And yeah, something about... There are lots of things to like about that show, but something about it just keeps on rolling off of me.
Yeah,
I can't put my finger on it.
It just doesn't work for you, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I like the art style. I think the characters are interesting, but something about it just keeps on bouncing off.
You bounce off it. I get it.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of things I feel that way about. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, just from a fluff standpoint, like Luffy's like the Gum Gum fruit, which turned Luffy into Rubber Man. It's actually on the sort of power scale of the Devil Fruits is actually fairly low in the totem pole. And Luffy managed to be people who are actually, in theory, more powerful than he is routinely because, A, he's the protagonist and a Determinator type, and B, he's really fucking creative.
Yeah, I remember catching the most of the story arc with the clown pirate early on and going, oh my god, he can separate his body parts and have them act independently and fly around? Why has he not taken over the world?
Because he's lazy.
Yeah, because he's...
That's the great thing is the author has written that Buggy should be one of the most powerful people out there, but he's lazy. He doesn't actually think his power set through as much as he could. Like, literally, no swordsman should be able to beat Buggy ever.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So, like, honestly, Hero System is like, and specifically, like any superhero game will do it, but specifically Hero System, you can replicate any of the Devil Fruit abilities in Hero System easily. And like the whole thing with hockey, which is basically crazy chi powers, easily done. Badass swordsmen, guys who have like incredible kicking abilities, people who can shapeshift, all that stuff. It's so easy. Hero System is such it's so well designed, and that's the thing is that the problem with like the whole sort of I dare you to come with mechanics for like can you come up with mechanics for genre X? The problem with that question is that Hero System is sort of explicitly designed to do that.
Shoujo romance.
You could do that. Most because you do mechanically.
No, you can't because it means everyone's in high school and therefore insufferable.
Oh, you can make characters insufferable in Hero System.
I wouldn't want to play in that game.
I didn't say you'd want to play the game. I'm saying that you can do it. It's possible. You take the cyclim, insufferable lunatic romantic. Done. Madman Oreo in the chat asks, even exploding snot bullets. Yes, easily done. No problem. That's an explosive energy blast with the special effect that you're shooting snot out of your nose. Done. What's your point? Sir, that's easy.
Exploding snot.
Oh, and
bullets.
if it leads to entangling people because it's sticky, you link an entangle to it. Done. Seriously.
What if my superpowers can affect people with a disease that causes their stomachs to explode into silver spheres that turn into giant chrome spiders? Then do show tunes. I know, the answer is transform.
Yeah. So I conceptually like the question, but
the problem is there are systems out there that are so ridiculously flexible that they can be you can twist them to fit whatever genre.
Right. Oh, and I mean I understand conceptually,
Hero system might have trouble with more of like a big like fleet thing, like doing like Legend of the Galactic Heroes or something.
Might be tricky. Just because
but there are other systems out there that will handle that just as well.
Yeah. Honestly, but I understand that the suggestion was sort of to spend an episode sort of detailing how we do that. But the problem is that would basically devolve into, especially because like that sort of suggestion I would lean toward. Most things I lean towards hero, and basically it'd be me explaining hero. It mostly just be an episode of me explaining hero mechanics, and that would get kind of dull, I think.
Also, that would be entirely you because I played Hero a few times and I still don't fully comprehend it.
Yeah, I understand. I love the system though. So yeah, hopefully that's useful. I mean, adapting video games for a lot of them, it's same sort of thing. Like a lot of them, a good chunk of like the RPG-ish video games are actually based on actual role-playing games. So, and actually, there are significant number of anime that do that also that are literally based on like D&D campaigns.
Record of Lodoss Wars.
It was literally Record of Lodoss War was the writers were handed a stack of Dungeons and Dragons books.
I still love that series. I mean, it's
despite all its flaws, I still really like it.
Yeah, it's flawed all to hell, but I still love that series. Like, dude, I even like Deedlit.
And you hate elves.
I hate elves, but she's awesome.
Yeah, well, she's likable mostly.
Yeah,
she's the people she gives crap to deserve it for those part. Like she gives Pard a lot of crap. Pard kind of deserves it.
Pard totally deserves it. Pard, stop charging things you can't hurt.
Ah!
Do not charge the dragon. It is too big to animate.
To be fair, he doesn't charge the dragon that wasn't animated.
That's true.
That dragon was well animated. Proving that they could animate dragons. Just the other ones were just, the whole reason they didn't animate them is to convey their size.
That and budget.
Well, shush. Oh, God. So that's going to do it for this week. We try to save the time at the end of every episode for viewer questions, like we did this week. See, we did it. Ha!
Ha! Success.
And if you have questions you'd like answered in the show, please send them to us. Our email address is surlygrognards@yahoo.com, surlygrognards @yahoo.com, or you can post them on our forums, which you can find at mechagm.forumer.com. If you got show topic suggestions, which we adore, you can send them to us at either of those places. And if you've got feedback for us, ways we can make the show better, criticism, etc., feel free to send them to us. We love getting that too. We want to make the show as good as possible for you guys. So yeah, if you've got show topic suggestions, questions, or feedback, we love getting that. Send it to either the email address.
All that stuff is vitally important, and we love it. And when I say I love it, we love it. I mean we love it. Like the dirty way.
Well, at least Eric does. I'm more. So, it's more of a platonic love with me. We record the show every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern here on twitch.tv/mechagm. If you want to tune in live, we love the live audience. We love seeing you guys there chattering and asking us questions in the chat. We try to keep an eye on that as much as possible. And I try to send a tweet out before the show goes live. You can keep it on my Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MechaGM. If you're listening to this on YouTube and you're enjoying it and want to see more of it, please do hit like and subscribe. And you'll be informed when the episodes go up on YouTube. Let's see, anything else? Am I forgetting any of the spiel, Eric?
I think you got it all.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you all had fun. Hope you found something useful out of what we've been talking about today. And we'll be back next week with, I don't know, something.
We'll figure some shit out.
Yeah.
We usually do, about 10 minutes before we actually go live.
We're so prepared. Anyways,
Nothing
guys.
but professionalism here. Absolutely. That's why at least I drink on the job.
Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon. Until we see you guys next. Be happy, be safe, keep on gaming, and we'll see you guys soon. Take care, guys.
Bye.